cases of Yasser El-Hamdi and Jose Padilla. Both are American citizens. Hamdi, a naturalized American citizen, sought his rights as an American citizen under the Constitution and was told the following by Bush operatives who argued before the court. You have no right to attorney, you have no right to trial, you have no right to jury, you have no right to any hearing whatsoever, and you can be held forever. Padilla, born in Brooklyn, New York, was told the same thing in two separate Supreme Court cases. But these guys are Muslims. They're not even white guys. They're probably not patriots. They're definitely not veterans. You're safe because you are white. You're not Muslim. They never say that to someone like you, a white, a Christian, maybe even a veteran. Or would they? I think by now you know that if I asked the question, not only would they, but they already have. Here's one example of a white, patriotic veteran. His name's Donald Vance. He's a native-born American who was imprisoned without charges or trial and tortured by being put in solitary confinement for 4 months and chained to the floor. And they kept him in prison for a full 4 months, even though his innocence was proven after just 2 weeks of captivity. Vance is a veteran of the first Gulf War. He was helping on the rebuilding in Iraq as a civilian contractor when he noticed corruption in his company and reported it to the FBI. Although he was identified as the FBI informant just 2 weeks after a raid, he was kept in solitary confinement for another 14 weeks and not even allowed to talk to his lawyer. His family at home didn't even know anything had happened to him. Donald Vance, especially Donald Vance, should become a household name across the country. He was denied his rights under the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, and it was in keeping with the Bush administration philosophy outlined in its draft for the Military Commissions Act. The constitutional standard for the treatment of prisoners, of course, is not torture. It's cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. Now I want to ask you, do you think you could waterboard your dog in a public square in any state of the Union and not get arrested for animal cruelty? The Eighth Amendment guarantees a protection against cruel and unusual punishments. But the Bush administration preferred a definition of torture in a 2003 memorandum as only pain involving major organ failure or death. Thus, the tough interrogation methods employed by the CIA and its rendition subcontractors included waterboarding, hypothermia, which resulted in deaths in Afghanistan, beatings, and shackling in painful stress positions. Not only that, but they outsourced some torture for electrocution in Egypt, boiling people alive in Uzbekistan, and taking razors to people's genitals in Morocco. The author of the president's torture policy, former Assistant Attorney General John Yoo, even said that it was possible for the president to legally order the crushing of an innocent child's testicles. Listen, here's the audio.
So in other words, if the president deems that he's got to torture somebody, including by crushing the testicles of the person's child, there is no law that can stop that.
No treaty.
And also no law by Congress. That's what you wrote in the August 2002 memo.
I think it depends on why the president thinks he needs to do that.
Most of the Republican candidates want torture to continue, even if they don't want to call it torture.
I would tell the people who had to do the interrogation to use every method they could think of. Shouldn't be torture, but every method they can think of. I'd say every method they could think of, and I would support them in doing that.
Is waterboarding torture? And as I just said, as a presidential candidate, I don't think it's wise for us to describe specifically which measures we would and would not use.
Most of the Republican candidates have implicitly adopted the John Yoo definition of torture. Only major organ failure is torture. That is the position of Mitt Romney, even though he doesn't explicitly state so. Yoo's testimony does far more than make Benjamin Mohammed al-Habashi's description of his torture credible. It also puts to lie the administration claim that the abusive excesses of Abu Ghraib and other detainees throughout the CIA rendition program were cases of renegade agents. Abu Ghraib was not the case of a few jailers who have gone wild, but rather part of the program approved by the Bush administration, which openly claimed the power to torture, regardless of what the law as passed by Congress said. But Yu's exposition of the Bush administration policy was simply an academic exercise of the outlandish boundaries of theoretical presidential power. It's crazy to believe the Bush administration would actually torture a child they knew to be innocent. They wouldn't do that. Would they? Oh, yes, they would. One of America's greatest heroes, Samuel Provance, an Iraqi war veteran, blew the lid off one example of how the U policy of torturing the children of detainees as a means of getting detainees to talk. When the Bush administration propagandists say we must support the troops, I have Samuel Provance in mind when I say that I do. Here's an excerpt from Provance's testimony before Congress about his experience as a systems analyst at Abu Ghraib. Quote, I told the interviewer that it was most likely that I had mentioned his name in connection with the interrogation of General Hamid Zabar, an Iraqi flag officer, and his 16-year-old son. We had interrogated his son together, the son incorrectly reported as having been 17 years old. I told him the account I had given, namely that General Zabar had been mistreated and his son taken prisoner to get him to talk. I was extremely uncomfortable about the way General Zabar had been treated, but particularly the fact that his son has been captured and used in that way. It struck me as morally reprehensible, and I could not understand why our command was doing it. Incidentally, when General Zabar was informed that his son had been anally raped in the prison, he became so completely unglued that he was absolutely useless for any intelligence to the United States. He became a sputtering mass of wailings. So much for the practical benefits of torture. But Samuel Provance is the voice of morality from our troops in the field, and nothing gives me more pause for hope when I hear testimony from true patriots like Samuel Provance. These are real men who, when ordered to commit attacks on the Constitution or to cover them up, in Provance's case, orders all the way down from the White House, they reply in effect, "No, damn you, I will not." Our armed forces remain full of such men, and it gives me great hope for the future. Men like these, and people like you, I hope, are the only ones who can save our Constitution and our freedoms.